Shalom everyone, I'm Rachel and I live in Jerusalem. Well, I don't live exactly inside the walls of Jerusalem. We live just outside on a farm with my parents. But I've hardly been home at all these days because of all the incredible things that have been happening here. It all started a few days ago when we were told by David, who was told by Isaiah, who was told by Zechariah, that Lazarus from Bethany had died. We all knew that Lazarus was very sick and that his sisters Martha and Mary had been caring for him. But we had been hoping and praying for a miracle. Everyone loves Lazarus and his sisters. His home is the most open and welcoming and hospitable, and everyone loves visiting them because Martha's food is absolutely delicious. She makes honey cake and halva. But this time, we weren't going to be visiting them in order to eat and to celebrate. This time we would be visiting them in order to mourn and to weep with them and to comfort Martha and Mary, who had lost their beloved brother Lazarus. We decided that we would travel to Bethany on foot. Father said that we couldn't take the donkey, it was still too young, and it hadn't been on such a journey before. I had been bringing up this donkey ever since it was a baby. It wasn't quite 4 years old, and it hadn't been ridden by anybody. And I was really excited because I wanted to be the first to ride the donkey. And so we set off for Bethany on foot. And finally, at around midday, we reached the home of Martha and Mary. And there were many other people there who had gathered to grieve with them. So Mother went off to help Martha settle all the visitors, and I went looking for Mary. I couldn't find her anywhere. I went into the house, I searched the rooms, and then suddenly I saw her running out of one of the rooms. She raced out of the house at such a pace, and she was running so fast. I went after her and I saw that Martha was running on ahead. They were running towards Lazarus's tomb. We thought they were all going there to mourn, so we went after them, and I pushed past the crowds to get to the front, and then suddenly I saw that a new visitor had arrived. It was Jesus of Nazareth, the teacher. And Martha and Mary had fallen at his feet, and they were kissing his feet, and they were crying. And Mary was saying, "Oh, Master, if only you had come sooner. If only you had come sooner, our brother would not have died." And they were crying, and we were crying, and Jesus was crying. He loved Lazarus so very much. And then he asked Martha and Mary to take him to Lazarus's tomb. And we all followed. Lazarus's tomb was a cave with a stone in front of it. And Jesus stood in front of the cave and he told them to roll the stone to one side. Everyone looked at him in disbelief. And Martha said to him, "But Master, our brother has been dead for 4 days. If we roll the stone to one side, there will be a terrible smell." But Jesus said, "Martha, just believe and you will see God's glory." So they did as they were told. Everyone shrank back. Some people hurried off. Others buried their faces and buried their noses into their sleeves and looked at one another, shaking their heads. But Jesus raised his hands and he prayed. And he stood before the open tomb and he said in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" His voice echoed around the tomb. Someone started laughing. But then we heard a movement inside the tomb. We heard something coming forward, and then suddenly a figure walked out of the tomb. A figure covered completely from head to toe in grave clothes, and his face had a cloth over it. Jesus told them to unwrap him, but nobody could move. Everyone was trembling and staring. And finally they did unwrap the grave clothes and they took the cloth from his face. And it was Lazarus. It was Lazarus inside those grave clothes. His eyes were open and he was moving. He was alive. He had been dead for 4 days and he was alive. It was the most incredible miracle any one of us had ever seen. And I didn't want to leave Jesus from that moment on. I wanted to be as close to him as possible. I wanted to be near him because it felt good to be near him. We stayed with him while he was in Bethany, and we left with him when he set off for Jerusalem. And as we walked along and past neighborhoods, whenever I saw children, I would call out to them, "Come and meet the teacher, Jesus from Nazareth. He works miracles. He raises people from the dead. He has come to take away all of the sadness in the world and to bring joy and hope and life. Come and see." As we approached Jerusalem, more and more people started gathering. People who had been healed by Jesus, people who had witnessed his miracles or heard him teach, and people who had never seen him before, all coming to greet him at the entrance to the city. I had never seen so many crowds gathering to greet anybody. Only when Herod arrived did I see so many people, and Herod would come with a chariot and with horses, and there would be instruments playing, and there would be garlands of flowers on the street and decorating the city walls. But how would Jesus arrive into Jerusalem? He was a king. He was the Son of God. But he was poor. He didn't have a chariot like Herod. He didn't have horses. He walked from place to place just like I do. I don't think he even had a donkey. But do you know what we saw? As we started walking towards Jerusalem, we saw people taking the clothes from off their backs and laying the clothes on the ground so that they formed like a large patchwork carpet leading all the way to the entrance of the city. And there weren't instruments playing, but children were climbing up the trees and they were taking branches in their hands and they were waving the branches and they were singing and they were crying out, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And so I ran on ahead and I also climbed a tree. And I also cut branches so that I could wave them with the children. And as I waved them, I sang, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." I knew that even if we weren't singing with all our might, the rocks themselves would have come to life and they would have sung as well to welcome Jesus the King. I could see a lot from up here. I could see all the people. And I could, you'll never believe what I could see. From a distance, I saw my donkey, my very own donkey. You know, the one I was telling you about, the one that's almost 4 years old, the one that I've been looking after ever since it was born, that hasn't been ridden by anybody. Well, guess who was riding him into Jerusalem? It was Jesus. Jesus was riding on the back of my donkey. And you should have seen my donkey. He was treading carefully over the clothes and the branches, careful not to slip or jolt. And he was walking so sensibly with Jesus on his back. I was so proud as people made way for him. And as they threw their branches and they rejoiced and as they sang, "Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." I know that now that Jesus has reached Jerusalem, he will do a great many wonderful things there. Who knows what will happen in these days leading up to Passover? Maybe he will be made a king. I wonder what he'll do. But what I know for certain is that I will never forget this day for the rest of my life and all the amazing things that happened. And I'm so glad that I could share them with you. And you must share them with others, with other children and people you meet, so that these events can go down in history and they can be remembered and celebrated all across the world, forever and ever.